The fact is we do have this unusual amount of money that is being spent, $15 billion, for graduate medical education. And so the question was, what is it that we're getting for that $15 billion?
1 out of every 7 Americans would like to have a family doctor as their primary care doctor, but can't find one.
We need the new generalism, general surgery, and just to teach generalism, that there's a knowledge about generalism that we're just not delivering in our educational system today. It's just not there.
And we're all agreed in the room that the current approach to GME is a failed system without accountability, and it should be done away with.
I can't justify what is going on in terms of the current distribution. So for me, I mean, if I were being asked, would you continue GME? The answer is only if it's reformed.
I'd like to welcome everyone here to the GME Summit West. Our first summit was held in Washington, D.C. Last June.
A couple of comments about the GME initiative, just so you again understand that this is a voluntary group. There is no board, there are no bank accounts, there are volunteers.
What we really want to come out of this are strategies for reforming GME funding to produce the physician workforce which America really needs.
We don't want this to be another academic exercise. There have been reports and reports and reports. Our goal is to have the IOM report that came out in 2014 not gather dust the way the other reports have. Many of the other advanced countries in the world have figured out that a strong primary care foundation leads to a better healthcare system. So we propose that 40% at least of the physician workforce be in primary care. Currently, we're at about 30%. And the problem is that currently the GME system is producing primary care at a rate of about 20%, and that's actually probably going to get worse.
The U.S. spends $13 billion a year subsidizing graduate medical education. Yes, almost all of this money winds up producing the wrong kind of doctors in the wrong places.
We generally have a mismatch between the health needs of the population and the specialty makeup of the physician workforce. Now, you can have a lot of debates about exactly what those numbers look like. I don't think anybody would argue that there's a mismatch. We are increasingly training a greater number of people, not just as specialists, but as super specialists.
Generalization, not specialization, is the key to access, and access to health care drives the health care outcomes.
There's a complete lack of fiscal transparency in what is going on.
It is, for all reasons you know better than anyone, primary care unfriendly. It is terribly complex. Nobody can understand the formulas. I have trouble, and I've been at it for 30 years.
There's a general lack of understanding about how GME works on the Hill. People have notions, but really don't have a deep understanding, and therefore find it very, very difficult to act.
There is a real gap between the scientific and clinical training that physicians receive, mostly in academic medical centers, and the kinds of skills and competencies that they need when it comes to actually taking care of patients, most of which occurs outside of the academic medical center in an ambulatory setting with a population that is presenting a different set of needs than the kind of people who tend to show up in the academic medical centers. And that gap is a real problem.
And the notion that you have to spend, you have to be based in the hospital, certainly in primary care, but in many specialties as well, is simply not the case. So we need to move beyond the hospital-based system, which is what we're tied to now.
It is hard to look at the geographic distribution that exists now and pretend like that solves anybody's view of equity. I will guarantee you the states that are currently the major beneficiaries of GME money, they are not going to volunteer to put money in the pot so you guys can get more. I absolutely guarantee it.
There's a wildly different per state average payment. Again, heavy in the Northeast, and for some reason extending across the north of the country in a way. But if you look at a state like New York or Connecticut, and I'll show some of these figures, they're getting something close to $150,000 a year per resident. And if you look at, say, Louisiana, they're getting, I believe, something like $50,000 a year per resident. If you divide the amount of money coming into a state from GME by the population, it ranges. In New York, you get about $100 per person in New York State of GME dollars for every single New Yorker. And if you go out west, most of those states are getting less than $10 per person. So however you score it, the system is badly irregular and arguably badly, severely unfair.
There's nothing in the current system by which we can renew, refresh, re-examine the system to move forward. There's the lack of a planning mechanism to couple the GME workforce production with the population needs.
That is, the GME, Medicare GME system, pays money and moves resources, but it doesn't have a brain. It doesn't think. It's driven by formulas. It makes sure on the heartbeats, but it can't move from point A to B, and it certainly can't analyze or think about anything about where it should go or it wants to go.
We hear a lot, and I hear it even more, forecasts of future physician shortages, very large numbers. Any of these groups have attempted to estimate the physician needs of the country 20 or 30 years down the road. They have screwed up that estimate unbelievably. In general, we know that just doing more is not going to solve the kind of problem that I've been addressing and that you're very well aware of. And in a similar manner, just adding more residency slots is not going to solve that problem either.
I think one of our jobs as we go forward is to try and educate the legislative health aides to understand some of the GME system and how it impacts legislation that may be written, because words matter and certain bills may not enact, if enacted, may not achieve their intent. Health advisors that we spoke with thought it would promote primary care, where they, after we spoke with them, understood that it probably would not.
The point is that I think that we really do need to return to a curriculum of generalism and that type of deductive reasoning that's required to see an undifferentiated patient in the office and be able to take care of them. Even if we refer them, to bring them back and help them with whatever illness or concerns they have.
Teaching health-centered GME is especially valuable in filling the primary care workforce gap.
The system should allow for both hospital and non-hospital entities to be recipients of funds. And the notion here is that you would develop a second approach to teaching, which would be community-based, but their philosophy, their focus, their identity, and their teaching and learning would take place in a non-hospital context, in a community-based context.
When we do go to Congress, their first question is, well, what does CMS say? Can't this be done through regulation? So we can answer that definitively. We're not going anywhere, and we're not going to get that in CMS.
Basically, this is in statute, which means if you want to change it significantly, you're going to have to change the law.
We can't change all this today, but this little corner called GME is probably very high leverage. And so thank you for coming to get to work on trying to change that.
We have residents being trained in ways that made sense for the 1980s that don't seem to make a lot of sense for 2015. The concern about whether or not healthcare is organized and delivered in a way that makes sense to meet the healthcare needs of the population, and have we set up a financially viable structure for Medicare? No is the answer.